before some of you got on that the power in my house has been flickering on and off a couple times this afternoon. So that means my router stops, and that means I will disappear. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but I will come back if it does. Are there any changes to the agenda? All right. Are there any folks from the public here? I don't see anyone. All right. Can I get somebody move the minutes of April 2nd, please? Mike Sigler? Dan, seconds. Thank you. Any questions? All right. Let's see. I guess we're doing roll call. So Dan Klein?
Yes.
Mike Sigler?
Yes.
Rich John? You are muted still. All right, we'll go on to Henry. Henry?
Yeah, I wasn't at the meeting. Can I still vote?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, and Rich looks like he just disappeared, so no Rich. All right, and I'm yes. All right, so I sent you all some documents that our Tompkins County Public Library director sent to me, and Annette is here to kind of give us some more information, have a chance for us to ask questions and just hear how this is all affecting the library. We did have a library board meeting, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, and that was informative for me. So I thought that it would be great to have Annette here. So go ahead, Annette, tell us all the good news.
Well, I wish it was all good news, and I will start with good news. Immediately upon closing, which we initiated when schools announced their closing, so we actually closed March 13th, our staff mobilized to offer virtual services. And particularly, we did that in areas that we knew would be already successful. So we expanded our Break for Books program to include Break for Books for children, for teens, and also added breaks for movies so that the community could continue to gather around sharing literature and popular reading and just other ways to come together in this time. We also took the password requirement off of our Wi-Fi. We didn't advertise that fact because we didn't want to encourage gathering, but for those who need it, they know libraries everywhere were doing similar steps, and we know that it was used in certain situations. And we also made it possible for libraries all throughout the county, library patrons, to get electronic library cards. So you didn't have to come to the library. You could just get a card and then access all of our electronic resources. We increased allocations from our print budgets that we still had at the time to electronic purchasing to build up that collection. And we even advertised the fact that anyone in New York State can get a New York Public Library card to really enhance people's access to books under any circumstance. So as we remained closed, we offered virtual story times. We're working on radio story times for those who don't have internet. We have a hang up on that because no one on our staff has the skill to edit the radio recordings in the way that WRFI wants. So if anyone knows someone with expertise there, we're certainly still trying to make that happen, and we may end up working with other radio stations, because that is a significant need throughout our county. And even those of us with internet, as Amanda referred to, we lose our connections. It doesn't mean that this is seamless. And so we're looking at both what could be successful and sustained and what our patrons and community really need. We put our 3D printer and our sewing machines into the mask making efforts. The 3D printer is at school. So they're printing the neck bands that make masks more comfortable for those required to wear them. I know, essential workers at this time. And our sewing machines are part of the BOCES effort. So we're doing, we're searching for opportunities so that the library can still be the source that people anticipate. Unfortunately, there's a great deal of frustration around what we can't do, but I'll talk about that in a minute. Some of the other things we're doing with the school include being a delivery site for those students who need to return materials to the school, especially seniors, because obviously school's not reopening. And so our book drops are open, so they're returning them to us. We have one person who will sort them, and then someone from the school will pick them up. So we'll all be contactless, and but we're really excited that we can find these opportunities and see where we can help. The school's helping us because summer reading is coming, and while we can offer virtual programming, game cards, and that sort of thing, we want to get books into readers' hands, so the school will distribute those for us. So we're really excited about that. So the biggest frustration is that we have a building full of resources. About 40,000 items are still checked out to the public, so that's great. There are books in people's hands, but we assume that most of those have been read. And so we know that other people are able to get books out there, but the bigger system you are, the more rules around what you can do, and we just haven't been able to do that. And of course, the big issue is around materials handling and the return of those materials. Right now, we don't want them back. We want them in people's hands, but it is frustrating not to be able to do that. And we know that even when the library reopens, that library service as people know it and value it and miss it is not going to be the same if we are only allowed to do limited pickup in the beginning. We may not even be able to provide internet access, and that we know to be helpful with job searches, which is clearly a need, to be helpful with mental health resources, although we do have virtual programming around mindfulness, and we support what our community partners are doing. We share that information on our COVID-19 website for resources for the community. It's not enough, and we're exceptionally frustrated and still looking at creative ways to bridge that gap. And we're also talking about what we need to, where do we fall in the phases of reopening, and if we can keep the same social distancing, can we allow that kind of limited pickup from our materials sooner? We have a great plan in place to deal with materials handling. And of course, we're going to be working with the governor within the governor's guidelines and the county health department's recommendations. And we're eagerly waiting for your plans so we can make sure ours are in place. So that's sort of where we are in that sort of climate. So the other thing we started looking at right away, Amanda mentioned I had sent around some documents, and one of those was, the first thing was our safety requirements for staff when we reopen. I realized that that is not everything that we will have to have in place. It seems like every day there's a new consideration. We're looking at entrances for the public to come in one way and out another, but we realize we'll need that for staff. There's just every single day there's something else that we think about. And but we've started ordering supplies, and we're ready with, the things that I shared. I'm not going to go into depth on that because all of these are just drafts. We've been working at it. We're working on a policy similar policy requirements and a similar training requirement for everything that will be needed to reopen in that way. But I think our staff has made an excellent start. Our leadership team then went on to look at that time, a phased reopening plan. And then of course it's a little bit confusing because the state plan is phased reopening, but we didn't want a detailed plan because it keeps changing. We wanted more of a guide. So we have a 6-step guide that we envision right now, but we know that as the governor and as the county release more of your information and steps forward, those things will have to change. But essentially, we're talking about reopening with closed stacks where people place a hold on an item, we prepare it and it gets picked up, and it's contactless. We will not be one of the sites that libraries may decide is right for them for curbside pickup, because we have a bus station in front and we can't let our solution create a problem. So we don't want to do that. And also on the Cayuga Street side, we would run out of space for cars parking very, very quickly. So we're advocating for in-lobby pickup, but still contactless. So that's the initial phase. We hope that we can also have our computers available. We have been advertising, promoting the census work. We know that we're going to want those computers available to people. So we, as part of the reopening, have an entirely new space plan so that they're spaced 6 feet apart, that there are, cleaning and sanitizing items available at each station, and we'll limit how long people can be there. So depending on as the requirements expand, that we're ready to offer that. We don't know if we'll be allowed to offer that, which is back to that frustrating piece, but we'll be ready. Once we have all of that in place and everything's known, we'll, as we're allowed, try to offer programming. In the beginning, we'll continue our virtual programming. There will probably be some time where virtual and physical programming overlap. We hope that day's coming, right? And then we do anticipate that some of the things that we're putting into place, such as radio story times, if we're able to get that off the ground, can remain part of our repertoire because we still have that in our county. So, and other things that allow us to look at service, or if we're able to offer that kind of pickup, maybe we can offer other locations. We have no idea how to do that. As you know, we were looking at a bookmobile, but that's clearly off the table. We were at such a healthy time where we started looking at expanded services and outreach and trying to reach every corner of Tompkins County. Now we just really want to figure out how to get our core services back. So after that programming, then we'll try to allow community gathering. The way that we're structuring our space so that staff are apart is to leave Borg Warner out of our equation so that that space is available to our community for gathering when it's allowed and when it's essential. So in the past, our space has been used as a polling site. Perhaps now it could be a location for vaccines because other places are busy with other COVID related things. Or we have already received a request to be open for the census training. Now that my answer is, I don't know. and so I've spoken to Amy about this, and we sort of said essentially that if we are able, you are certainly first priority, but we just don't know. So that's around our services and goals and our path forward. Obviously, the other big factor is the financial impact. And we did have our meeting prior to the Tuesday night legislative meeting with Jason, with our full board of trustees. So, and with our finance and personnel committee, so that we were prepared for the anticipated third quarter 25% reduction. And also we see that it's likely for fourth quarter. So once we received that news, we did apply for the Paycheck Protection Program loan and did receive that. So that funding will help us weather that cost, but we are extremely aware that there's more to be done around the expense of the library. And so our first steps when we started to, we learned about some other funding losses before we heard from the county. For example, the state budget, we get state funding and that's likely to be cut about 25%. We'll know that better next week, as you know some of the information from the state. Our city funding is dependent on the sales tax, just as your sales tax is streamed, that's ours. So we know that that's going to be cut. We were aware of that right away with all of the business closings. The town funds part of our Sunday hours, and obviously they're facing the same kind of financial issues as everyone else. So we don't anticipate Sunday hour support. We know that the Friends sale was canceled for spring and don't really envision the possibility of them being able to hold the sale in the same way even in the fall, because obviously it's gathering and it's such a part of being there. They are looking at incredible ways to try to sell books, but it's so experiential that they, even if they can do that with some of their booksellers and sell online, they're not going to realize the same kind of return. Our foundation did have a successful readathon for us on the library side that's not financial. It was a wonderful opportunity to celebrate a whole day of reading and people coming together. It also was successful and reached their, they had originally had a goal of raising $25,000, immediately realized that was lofty in this environment and cut their expectation back to 15,000 because prior to the actual date, they had raised about 10. And with the day of giving, they were able to cross the $20,000 threshold. So it's clear that people are still missing their library, and we're grateful for that support, but we know that there are so many needs around all of this. So what we're trying to do is connect with our community partners and do what we can to offset some of those. But the other thing we did was implement cost-saving measures. Immediately, we instituted a hiring freeze. We looked at our budget and said, this is not the year for an anniversary celebration. We're limiting staff travel, obviously the bookmobile, all of those things. The way that we're structured is that it's really, and like most businesses, it's really personnel and benefits where we can realize savings. So that only netted, if we're really generous in looking at all of those lines, around $50,000, a $450,000 cut from the county, which is what it will translate to if we receive both third and fourth quarter. Obviously means that we need to do more than that. So we will have to do what you're doing and look at first voluntary separation and second involuntary separation. We were right in the middle of negotiations, and when the library closed, they were effectively suspended. Our support staff union formally suspended that until we open, and our professional staff union just let that be a natural consequence. So, but no resolution had taken place there. But we know that a loss this great now is something that we have to look at our whole budget for 2021. So the way civil service works, which is not a surprise, and the union to any of you, this is what everyone's dealing with, voluntary separation with using some incentives to encourage people to permanently not be on our workforce, and would allow us to restructure because we have a significant population that's very near retirement. And there is something unique about this time where while people might not have been willing to look at early retirement or incentivized retirement or resignation, they may, because working with the public in this environment presents all kinds of challenges. So it's possible. So while our short-term budget is, because we have the PPE, allows us to have some time to look at all of this and consider these voluntary separations in a really good way. It's really moving forward into 2021 and looking at our budget reductions. So that's, and again, the information that I shared with you is in draft form, and that financial impact piece was before we had any actual figures. We just saw what was coming. So those dates no longer really are relevant. We're looking at every situation, and we're all also having to work with our community to help them understand how much has changed about library service because of this. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Annette. It is heartbreaking. It's hard that the library is the heart of the community, and it's hard for people right now. So a couple of questions, and I just want to say to my legislator colleagues, we have a lot to get through today. So folks who are not on the committee, I'm going to give you one shot per topic. So use it well. Rich, go ahead.
Thank you, Amanda. Annette, maybe I missed it in an audio dropout because it was breaking up a bit.
I'm sorry.
You're getting books back. I thought you said you're not having them back. Is there, if that's not the case, is there a way to just quarantine them, that you receive them and let them sit for 2 weeks?
Yes, that's part of our materials handling. So initially, what I was saying is that the books that are out there currently, our book drop is still open, so people can return materials. But if we could get books to people and we didn't have to worry for whatever interim about them coming back in such a quick time, we don't care. It's much better in readers' hands than sitting in that building with only our tech support and security. So I was saying that I would love to see them out there. We will get them back. And when we are able to offer any kind of real reopening, then we'll quarantine materials for the recommended time for paper is 72 hours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Martha?
Thanks. Hi, Annette.
Hi.
Quite a story. Every agency, whatever, has a different story. I'm a little puzzled about your savings. PPE is supposed to cover your salary,
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So, and assuming that you're not taking, that you will still have those folks on your roster at the end of 8 weeks, that's a grant. You don't have to pay that back.
That's correct. For that amount of time, that's correct. Yes.
And I understand there's some part of it, maybe a quarter of the loan is also for various operating expenses, utilities, et cetera, right?
Well, it won't be for us. The amount of the loan is nearly equal to the cut in county funding if we also receive the second quarter reduction. So it will be covering personnel expenses, but it may cover personnel expenses as part of the voluntary incentives to leave. So any personnel expense is acceptable. So that gives us time to cover expenses right now, the PPP protection plan. But we know that I'm jumping ahead because you're only looking at 2020 right now. But with this type of reduction in spending and knowing our structure, it is prudent for us to look at 2021 and make changes to our structure that could enable us to trim our budget even further in a way that's super responsible.
No, yeah, absolutely, because we can't expect this PPP to continue. So,
No.
so it sounds like for 2020, and maybe you can get back to us with kind of the balance sheet. It sounds like PPP for 2020, you might be kind of okay.
That's correct. That's, I mean, that's a reasonable statement, Martha. I think that did give us that ability to be kind of okay with the loss that we're anticipating from the county. However, because we're anticipating so many other cuts, that I don't think we're going to be as okay as we'd like to be. We get about 300,000 from each of our philanthropic means, which is from each, the Friends and from the foundation. So that's, $600,000 loss, worst case. It's not going to be that, but it's going to be a significant portion of that. And, we know to expect at least 25% cut in the state, at least. I mean, I can't imagine what sales tax revenue is going to be. So our city funding is going to be down, 80%? I don't know. I mean, if you just took by months, maybe we had January and February. So it seems reasonable that, so I don't know. And again, we're tied to just the same as you are as recovery. So we're not devastated. We're not devastated by those cuts.
I didn't mean your budget was healthy.
Yes. Yes.
It wasn't catastrophic.
Well,
I'm not accusing
Not
you.
yet.
But yes,
Not yet.
it does. It really does. That loan will really be the saving grace for our budget for 2020. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Annie,
Thank
I like your background, Annie. Nice background.
Thank you. I'm broadcasting virtually from in front of the Ulysses Philomathic Library, in case people couldn't see it there, Annette's old stopping ground. I didn't have a quick comment, but I just wanted to say that I know we're in very capable hands, Annette, with you and your staff, and I'm sorry that you have to go through all this, but I have every faith in you. So thank you.
Thanks, Anne. And I know we're all doing it together. We're not alone. And yay, Ulysses.
Henry.
Yes, thank you, Annette, for that presentation. I was wondering.
Henry, are you there?
Yeah.
I can hear him.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm off mute. Okay. I was wondering whether you considered having South Cayuga as a drop-off and pickup site as opposed to Green Street.
Yes, but what on Cayuga, because of the there's first the garage and then there's only about 2 spots that we really could have people pull up and out. We run out of space if people are lining up for holds. Since that's our only point, it's hard to know what people's behavior and confidence will be with having shared materials in their home, with pulling up. But the fact is that we circulate about 800,000 items. So just having such a small spot on the street doesn't seem to, I've said a couple of times that one of the things about COVID-19 has really resulted in what I call a failure of imagination for me to envision some of these. And our staff is really working hard and we're talking with community partners. But there's so many limitations that usually I'm very good at seeing possibilities, but right now it's a little bit more challenging. But we're open if people have ideas. That's why we're also thinking about other sites if we could envision how to get there. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. Maybe we shouldn't have looked at a bookmobile. We should have looked at a van so that we could deliver books. But right now we can't even do our books by mail program. Another heartbreak because people could not accept those materials from a library at this time.
Can I ask one more question? I just was online and looking at the Onondaga Library, and they claim they're gonna try to open phase 1 of the reopening plan, not with restaurants. They're gonna do curbside delivery. What do you consider yourself, like a restaurant, or do you consider yourself like a real estate corporation, or?
I wish I knew the answer to where libraries land, and I actually have started conversations. I saw the Post Standard article where legislators are trying to lump libraries into that phase 1 with curbside delivery, and if they allow it, I'd be game. But
Okay.
but what I believe, the way that the best that I can understand through what libraries and library systems are looking at, is that we are truly phase 4 because we're arts, education, and recreation. I think you're making a really big leap to say we fit in that phase 1 with the limited retail. I'm willing to go there, but I'm waiting to hear if those measures are actually successful and allowed. I don't know, Jason, if you could give me any more guidance on that, but that's how we're looking at it. And I know that's how our systems are looking at it. So I don't have that many voices advocating it, although there are some libraries within our system who are trying very hard to make that happen. So not only do I have to make the case for curbside, but I have to equate curbside and in lobby, so that as long as it's contactless, right? If you can get your coffee that way, why not your book?
Yeah.
I'm working on it. I'm
It seems
working
like
on it.
It sounds like you at least be phase 3 with restaurants.
Hope so. I really do hope so, but I really I forgot to mention that because of this uncertainty and how much patrons and staff want to know, this has not yet gone through the to the executive committee, but it will this afternoon. We anticipate saying that we'll be fully closed through June 30th. That gives us that window to be able to be open if we're allowed with some limited service. So that's what do you call that? Partially closed. But so but we know that staff and the community really need to know what we're doing, how we're doing it. And so by Friday, I hope to have more clear guidance of what to expect from our library.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jason, do you have any thoughts on where, if the library is more like a restaurant or an arts museum?
I think Annette's on point with her gut interpretation. I would imagine a lot of industries and sectors are going to make a push to be part of phase 1. But I probably agree with Annette. It's probably more along the lines of the education route. But whatever we can do to help that along and that they feel comfortable doing, we'll do. It's too early to tell right now, but I'm gonna say there's probably gonna be a lot of creativity amongst different industries to figure out how they can fit into a phase 1. But we'll work with the library to the best we can to help them for whatever level of phase they feel comfortable in working within. So I know you put a lot of work into this, Annette. We talked about it a week or two ago, so I think you're well ahead of most folks, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I do hope we can see some movement, but I know we're not the only ones trying to come up with that case. Thanks.
Deborah, last question, then we need to move on.
I just wanted to compliment you on your thoughtful presentation, the planning that you've done, the amount of thought that you're giving to this, and the fact that you're not yelling at us.
Never.
So thanks very much.
Thank you. I know that this is so hard for everyone, and I have to say it's our leadership team who's really been diving in, and the thoughtful board support. And Amanda, I can't thank you enough for offering that. Oh, and one exciting thing that I don't know if everyone knows that I did forget to mention, some of our virtual programs have been attended by jail participants. So while we aren't officially doing outreach, it is reaching people in some really spectacular ways. So thank you so much for that support. Please pass that on to Shauna too, because she's the one who made that connection for us. Thank you.
Great. Well, definitely, Annette, thank you so much for everything. And just so you know, this is what I'm drinking my coffee out of today. It's my favorite mug. And I love my library, and I love all libraries. So you guys, you and your staff are doing amazing work. So thank you. And thank you for being here and giving everyone an update.
Absolutely. And feel free to let me know if you have questions or concerns after this. I'm happy to talk about it. Thanks so
Great.
much.
All
Bye-bye.
right, thank you. All right, Deborah, your hand is still up. Okay, thank you. Let's see, we're moving on to assessment. We have a resolution, and I think Jay, I thought I saw Jay's name here. So can I have someone move this? It's the resolution refund of taxes, Village of Cayuga Heights, tax parcel 18111. Henry moves it, Rich seconds it. And Jay, can you just give us a quick thought on this?
Yeah, this is just not really a clerical error, but I changed an exemption on a property and I didn't have anything on record where the town of Ithaca agreed to exempt the Village of Cayuga Heights properties for fire taxes. It's an odd thing of the real property tax law, but I do have that agreement now. So this is something so that the town of Ithaca can credit the Village of Cayuga Heights for these taxes.
Okay, great. Any questions? All right, let's see. Henry, how do you vote?
Oh, yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
and Dan.
Yes.
I'm yes. I keep forgetting that Dan is in chambers, and I'm like looking on all the little boxes for him. Okay, so that passes. Thank you. And Jay sent us an update from the assessment department. I hope folks had a chance to read that. Does anybody have any quick questions for him at the moment? All right, I guess not. Thank you very much, Jay, for this and for all the other stuff you're doing.
No problem. Questions, give you all.
Thanks. All right, moving on. Elizabeth Cree is here from the Board of Elections. I don't see Steve DeWitt, but oh yeah, there he is. And thank you for being here. I think we just were, there's been a lot of changes and updates in this various elections and the ballots and all of that. And so I think folks have questions and any just sort of basic updates you want to give us for what's going on this week would be great.
More day by day.
Right.
So we're scheduled tomorrow to mail out all our applications for absentee. However, the governor, I think, changed the absentee applications. So I'm trying to work with the vendor and talk to Steve on what we're going to do about that. I don't know if the printing happened or not. I believe the executive order is supposed to come out later today or tomorrow. And then obviously we will be having a lot of return absentee applications as soon as that goes out.
Right. Steve, are you with us? He's still muted. Well, let me see if folks have questions.
Well, the one thing too is the presidential primary is back on again, but I wanted to let you know that the state is appealing that decision. So we're on hold there as well. But we had actually boxed up all our ballots that we had voted because we have to retain them for 2 years. And we had to go back and get them because we don't know if we have a presidential primary or not.
Is there a deadline for when they have to decide that by, or can it just be like the week before? I mean,
I know that election cases have top priority. They're usually pushed through the court system, so it'll be sooner rather than later, I hope.
all right, well, it's interesting. Henry?
So you cannot mail out the absentee ballots until the primary is decided?
We actually had mailed the absentee ballots out before, and then the state commissioners called off the presidential primary.
Right.
So we had a lot of votes already in our office secured. And now we have to re-engage and mail to anyone that wants an absentee for the presidential election as well.
Okay.
Yeah, we're having fun, as Mike Hunter said.
Yeah, sounds a bit confusing. Annie?
Thank you, Amanda. So Elizabeth, I just wanted to follow up. I had sent me the voter roll, and I was looking in my district for the folks over the age of 65, just to get an idea of, how, if I could reach out to them or something. And there are over, just to give you an idea, over 1,130 people in my district alone that are over the age of 65.
Wow.
So reaching out individually is impossible. So I'm gonna have to figure out something else, but I have been trying to reach out into different pockets of folks in the older age group. But my question is, as far as ballots, are for any elections coming up, are folks gonna get, do we know, ballots mailed to them and not have to request absentee ballots?
You always have to request the absentee ballot. It's everyone that is a registered Democrat in the county is going to get an absentee application so that they can apply for it.
Okay.
And I think I know we put at least 500 requests in already.
Okay, so they're gonna get an application, have to send that in and then wait for the ballot. It's too bad that they're not just gonna get the ballot, but I guess that's better
Well,
than
one
nothing.
thing is the ballot's not ready for one reason. And two is there is no ID requirements for voting. The only way that we can verify voting is by their signature. So we have to have a signature, not on this absentee application. This is the only time we've never had to have that. But when the signature comes back, we have to check that also on the register rolls.
And you have to do all that extra processing, right, of the absentee ballots, sending them the ballots, and then processing the ballots when they come in individually. So that's a lot more work for you guys, right?
Yeah, it's a ton more. We have we have people all over the place working right now just to keep up with it.
Wow. Well, thank you for doing that.
I did want to tell you too that we also have to have early voting and we also have to have the polls open. So we've lost a couple of poll sites. We lost Ithaca College. So we're going to be over at the business park for that. We got a contract, and every time we lose a polling site, we have to go through a whole assessment, especially because of disabilities. So we have to redraw everything and set everything up. We also have to mail to every voter. It's not by household that their polling place has changed. So we also lost Kendall for this election. I'm working with the town of Lansing Hall because they're worried about having so much traffic in there. And that's a 2-district polling place. So there's a lot of voters there. I think I came up with a solution with that we're working on. Steve's okay with as well. Maybe having them work from home that day, the workers, so that the inspectors and the voters can go into the site. And then I lost, I've replaced them for now, but I lost about 10 workers so far for the election because of the virus.
Well, that was going to be my question. If you have enough staff for all the various pieces that you're working on. I mean, seems like a lot of people might not want to be poll workers anymore.
No, they really don't.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we do, but right now we're on top of it, but we haven't gotten the big mailing out yet. We're going to have to bring in temporaries for sure, because we only have 9 days to certify the election and we can't start counting till 7. We did order through grant money another scanner for absentees, and Steve drew up a plan where we have different teams in order to get those counted.
Okay. Martha?
Much. Hi, Elizabeth. the issue, I was going to ask about staff too. You're not saying people got sick, people just said that they didn't want to be, okay.
Yeah, they just don't want to have anything to do with it right now, no exposure.
My understanding about mailing everybody an absentee ballot, that's going through the legislature, and the legislature has to actually, they passed the bill last session, they have to pass it again next year, and then it goes to the voters for a referendum like fall of 2021 or something, if assuming they pass. That's right? Is that right?
It has to be a change in the state constitution, so it would have to go on the ballot to all the voters.
So that's why you're not able to just mail ballots to everybody at this point.
However, the school boards have an executive order to mail all the ballots. So normally we use our inspectors and they use our voting machines, and we actually produce the ballot for them. And this time they're just doing all absentees.
Okay.
The city of Ithaca has asked us to have some machines though ready, and I think it's so that they can count the ballots instead of counting all those ballots manually. And I believe Trumansburg as well is going to do that. So their election is June 7th.
Mhm.
So we're on top of each other with elections as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate all that you're managing to
Thank you.
figure out.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Henry, do you have your hand up again?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, Elizabeth, are you guys all set with the various PPE materials and also for protocols of dealing with people during election day?
So we have access to the Amazon government account, but they were out of a lot of different things. So we went to local companies, like I think we went to the Ithaca Beer Company because they were making sanitizer. We're working with county communications on some postering, and we're working with the state board as well. And we're gonna have to actually draw different plans to space everyone out.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for all that you're doing. I know it sounds like a Herculean task. I don't know how.
I appreciate you saying that because it is at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's, yeah, it's huge. So thanks to you and to Steve and to all your staff, and, you know,
I'll let them know.
yeah, and keep us informed. And if there's ways that we can support you all, I'm sure we all want to. So, yeah.
Much appreciated. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, now we get to talk about policies again. We haven't talked about policies in months. This is so exciting, Lisa.
I know, it's the perfect quarantine activity.
Yeah, just go over policies and nitpick things. So let's see. So we have two policies. I guess let's have somebody move that, and then we'll talk about them individually. Rich, I have a second. Dan. And all right, so the first policy is the equal employment opportunity policy. Go ahead, Lisa, give us a little update.
Sure. So I hesitate anymore to say these are straightforward because you never know, but both of these seem on the surface pretty straightforward. This is a new policy. We do not have an equal employment opportunity policy. It is, I think, something that's fairly standard, and it comes, you know, directly from federal and state law. It's also, you know, we have a very large affirmative action policy that's out of date, and I think this takes pieces of that and makes it into a smaller, more digestible policy, which we've kind of been doing for over the last year in terms of our anti-discrimination policies and so on and so forth. So at some point we can just retire the affirmative action policy when we've got all of the substantive pieces broken out into smaller policies. And this policy also, there are certain federal grants that, for instance, the planning department and others have applied for, in which they have asked for copies of the county's equal employment opportunity policy. So that's kind of the origin of where this came from. And it's basically just consistent with all of the relevant federal and state laws.
All right, great. Questions for Lisa, or comments or edits from anyone? Come on, people. Okay, well, I just had one tiny little typo on packet page 15 under routine EEO operations and practices, number 2, letter A. I think it's supposed to say viable contact with protected classes, with protected class recruitment. I don't know, there's something about that sentence that.
Yes. I think you're right. Protected class recruitment sources. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then that was it. And that's way too easy. All right. The second one, military leave.
Sure. So this policy we have had, and it was last updated in 2011, and it really needed some additional updates because it was not consistent with federal military law. And so we basically, we made those changes to make it consistent. And it this actually came into play a few months ago, where I had to look at a pay for someone who is going on military leave, and our policy did not give clear guidance. We ended up having to go into the federal military law to see what we had to do. So that was the origins of the change. And so with this update, we actually have since had someone else go out on military leave, and now we can refer to this. We have to refer to the federal law. So now this is much more relevant.
Great. And I assume that J.R. Claiborne had input into this, or, I mean, is he involved, or? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Okay, folks, other questions on this one? All right, exciting. Let's take a vote. Dan Klein.
Yes.
Henry Granison.
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
Yes.
Rich John.
Yes.
And I'm yes. Thank you. Well, Lisa, that was easy. So next time, let's do that again.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for continuing to work on these and everything else. So that's great. All right, now the topic that we've all been waiting for. So I had written a document about the various options. I sent that to committee members. My goal in talking about this redistricting with our timeline and what we're looking at for the rest of the year is to come out of this meeting with 2 options for the rest of the legislature to consider. And I'm not exactly sure of process or how we'll go forward with the whole legislature, but I do want to try to narrow it down today. And again, I want the committee members to say whatever you want to say. Non-committee members, you'll each get one shot to talk. And as most of you should know, that Rich wrote an op-ed, and I worked on that, and Mike Sigler had some input. and that was published last week. So folks may have gotten a little bit of feedback from constituents. I know I did. I think Henry did as well. So that was the point of the op-ed, was to get the public to even know that this situation is happening. And I think to some extent that was really helpful. So thanks, Rich, for working on that. So we'll just launch in, and go ahead, Rich.
Thanks, Amanda. And thank you for working on the memo, because it really does lay out options. You know, I agree with the ones where you say we should probably take things off the table. Leading up to this meeting, I was thinking I was favoring the 1 year followed by a 4 year, but given the delays we're going to almost certainly see, and that it wouldn't accomplish its purpose, I'm inclined to go to, what's the number on your memo? Do nothing. 6.
Really?
Do nothing. Yeah.
Wow. So let me I'll just interrupt.
Beyond that, I would go to 3 year followed by 4.
You would go to 3 year or 2 year?
2 year would
2
be
year.
my second choice. Number 3 on your list.
So yes, Annie, I can send that to the whole legislature. I can't do that right at this moment, but I can just spell out what it did. What I did was I took the main options that we've talked about, and the feedback that I've gotten so far from the couple of meetings that we've had about this, and kind of tried to narrow it down a little bit. And so basically, one of the options was weighted voting, and I'm pretty sure there was nobody who wanted that. So I think we should just take that off the table. As Rich just said, one option was to have a 1 year term followed by going back to 4 year terms. And Rich just said exactly what I wrote, and is that, you know, with the major delays of the census, even a 1 year term is really probably not going to give us enough time, considering that the chaos, but just considering we really don't know when we're going to get the census data. So I was recommending we take that off the table. 2 options that I think should still be on the table are a 2 year term followed by a return to 4 year terms, and a 3 year term followed by a return to 4 year terms. And those are slightly different because one of them would take us to align with presidential years, and one would keep us aligned with town election years. So depending on if you have a priority of if you'd like to be in presidential years or town years, that's how those two vary. And then the other option, wait, let me see. Right, we had an option of 5 year terms. And while I think that was an intriguing idea, I didn't really hear a ton of support for that, as well as switching to 2 year terms completely. And I don't think anybody supported that. So the other option was, as Rich also just said, was to do nothing. And I think that, so just to summarize, for those of you who don't have the document in front of you, I think what I've narrowed it down to is a 2 year term, a 3 year term, followed by 4 year terms, or do nothing. So I don't know if Henry or Dan or Mike Sigler want to, okay, Mike Sigler?
Yeah, no, I read through everything, and I'm happy with Rich's what he said. I didn't have really anything to add because I was looking at my list. I highlighted the ones I liked, and I'm like, well, yeah, do nothing is actually an option. It's not. I know, it's hard to do that. You put all this work into something, and then at the end you go, well, things look okay. They don't look okay, but considering what's going on. But then, the one that really stands out for me is number 3. You know, the idea of doing a 2-year term, because then it's kind of like, at least the next campaign, you're not campaigning for nothing. I mean, 2-year term is pretty good length of time. And it basically keeps the calendar the same, which I like too. It's the most consistent, I think, with where we are right now. And frankly, I think the way elections have been run up till now have been pretty good. So that's about it. So I was happy to hear that Rich came up with those 2 as well. So.
Great, thank you. Dan?
Thanks. So first of all, I just want to say I just forwarded your email to the whole legislature. So if you
Thank you.
want to tune in right now, you can find it. And I'm just going to agree with both of what just got said. I'm okay with do nothing, and I'm okay with the 2-year followed by the 4-year terms.
Wow, this is going much smoother than I thought it was going to go. Henry?
Yes, my first preference will also be to do nothing. Although my second preference is actually the 5-year terms. I just think it makes it cleaner and, you know, makes it nice. But again, the first option would clearly be to do nothing.
Okay. And so for me, I think, you know, one of the big challenges obviously is the census, and one of my biggest concerns is the college students and the fact that it's not going to be an accurate count, no matter what. The college students is just not going to be accurate. And you know, I think what that just means our census data is going to be off, and it's hard for me to want to change what we're doing based on, you know, incomplete or incorrect information. So thank you all for being very clear. Let's go to Deborah, and then Annie, and then Martha.
Thank you. Are we even allowed to do nothing? I thought there was something in the county law or in the charter that said that when we get the census results, we shall have a commission.
Jonathan?
Yeah, in my view, we can do nothing. That would be fine.
Well, then I vote for doing nothing, because this census, between the pandemic and the administration's mishandling of things, this census, I might as well pull a number out of my ear. So that's my thought on this.
I totally vote for that.
Yeah.
Out of my ear?
Yeah, I want to see the number that comes out of Deb's ear. Thank you. Who did I say was next? Annie?
Thank you. It's hard to follow that. Picturing numbers coming out of her ears. But so for what it's worth, I don't have your options there, but as you know, I've looked at options before and made charts of options. And for what it's worth, for my 2 cents, and I know I'm not on the committee, but thank you for letting me put my 2 cents in, is to either do nothing or, you know, for this term. It doesn't mean we're going to do nothing, you know, forever, as probably everybody knows, but I just want to say this is that, you know, if we do nothing for the coming election and then the next election after that, before that election, we would have some type of commission, I would imagine, that's going to look at redistricting at that point. I would also, the 5-year term intrigues me, but I don't know when we would start that, because if we started it this next election, then we'd be off for 5 years rather than just being off for 4 years. But I have no idea when as Amanda said, I have no faith in the inaccurate census. So we're going to be off for a long time. So I'm not sure what a good option is at this point.
Great, thank you. Martha?
Yeah, I think there's a little confusion here. I think the present issue in front of us that what I thought was the present issue, though I haven't seen the document, is that whether to put something on the referendum, on a referendum for this fall to change the length of the next terms. So do
Yes.
nothing, I think, means the next terms would be 4 years. It doesn't mean we don't have a redistricting commission after we get the census data. Isn't that right? I think
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
have a commission.
I think we can certainly have a commission, and it probably makes sense to have a group looking at that. This does just mean that we would do nothing in terms of changing our terms.
Right. I think, I'm pretty sure that we are required to redistrict in some way. And Mike Lane is not here, but I'm pretty sure we're required to have a commission. No, wait, we're required to redistrict based on whatever the new numbers are. We don't get to say we don't like those numbers. That our choice, and we put it in the charter, was to have an independent commission, not to do it ourselves as a committee. So that follows, that's a subsequent decision. The present decision is just about whether we seek different kinds of terms. So, but the comment I originally was going to make was, what about the public here? And I know you sent out an op-ed, that's great. This whole question is really, is very important. And even though the public is really distracted, this is a critical moment. And I think we really need to make sure we're getting the word out there that this is an issue, what the alternatives are. I would really hate to see this boiled down to almost no choices before the public even knows we're thinking about it. And by the way, since I haven't seen the document or anything, but my sense is I would rather go with a 2-year term than with continuing with 4-year terms. I did have a question in the chat. Is the president, and I'm spitting all this out here because you only have one time to raise my hand because I'm not on the committee.
Yep.
So, the presidential year, which version aligns? I guess the 2-year term aligns with which is which?
No, I think it's if we did a 3-year term going back to 4-year terms, that would switch us to 2020. The next election would be 2024. So that would be on even years. So if we did a 2-year term, that keeps us in line with town elections like next year.
Okay.
Yeah. And the document really is what I said at the beginning. It's just a summary of the different options that we've talked about, and just a few minor pros and cons. But I guess, Jonathan, I don't know if you want to elaborate any more. I mean, I think what Martha's saying is that we will need a commission to look at the data and to go forward, but we still have, like, the way that it's coming in and the timing is such that we may not have time to do anything about it, hence the whole discussion about changing terms. But we still will have a redistricting commission.
Right. Yeah, they're two entirely different requirements. The commission is part of our charter. We have to have a commission unless we change our charter. There's no law that says you have to have a commission other than our charter. Okay, we could change that if we wanted to, but we can't not have a commission unless we change our charter. Not every county has a commission. In fact, most don't. The law regarding changing and the census has nothing to do with a commission. It's just under federal law, there's unequal representation at some point if the census data comes out and you continue having elections based on districts which are very inconsistent. And it's defined how inconsistent in the various cases, but are inconsistent with the census. That's never been applied to, to the current term, right? So I wouldn't worry about the current term. I would worry about when the next term comes if you had elections and they were inconsistent with the census. But I've never heard of any requirement or any court ever requiring somebody to have early elections or earlier election. That would be our option based on, the feeling, if we felt that way or the legislature felt that way, that we simply didn't want to be out of conformance with the census for that additional year or two. But I don't see any legal requirement of that.
Okay,
Right.
great. Thank you.
That's the question of, if we go ahead in 2021 with a 4-year term, we're out of sync of, or we haven't reevaluated based on new census data. And it's unlikely that the data will match up exactly as it did 10 years ago. So that would probably be out of sync. But this year's decision is not about a commission, it's about whether to change the terms. Right?
Rich. Yeah. Yep. Rich, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that's correct. What we're talking about is, when do we hold elections? We'd certainly want to do the commission, and I believe realign our districts when we have good information from the census. The reason I'm leaning towards do nothing is it seems there's so much uncertainty on when we'd have that information and the condition of that information at this point that I'm not sure we'd be able to do a good job. So it's unfortunate. I think, as we made clear in the op-ed piece, there is no easy, good solution here. It's just which one is less bad.
Yeah.
And my other question was about the public involvement.
Yeah, so I know on the South Hill listserv, Henry posted the op-ed and got a couple of responses that I think only maybe 2 that that they suggested doing the 1-year term and then going back to 4 years. We didn't really deeply go into we mentioned the census delay, data delay, but we didn't deeply go into that in the op-ed, so people may not fully be aware of it. That was also the response I got personally from one of my constituents was, let's do the 1 year. So that's a very small response from the public, but that might be an indicator that, folks might want to do the redistricting sooner rather than later, and maybe 2 years makes more sense because it does come up with it earlier. I think that, I guess I don't really know. I mean, maybe we could bring Dominic in and have him do some, a little bit of public outreach and say, these are the options that we're considering, and try to get some more feedback. As Dan has said several times, we're getting, our timeline is getting shorter if we need to put something on the ballot for the fall. That's why I wanted to come out of this meeting with 2 options that the full legislature could take a vote on. So, Dan?
Yeah, at one time I did like the idea of the 1-year term, but Mr. Sigler, the gentleman from Lansing, convinced me that it really is better if we're aligned with the town elections. I think that's really important, and I'm not sure the public. I'm not even sure I read the op-ed. I'm sorry, but I'm not. Was that in there? Did that part make it in? Okay, I'm not sure that is grasped why that matters as much. Anyway, so I just want to say, for me, that's a very important component of it, to keep it an even number of years, 2 or 4.
Right. Okay. Great. Henry, is your hand up again?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think we'll be out of sync longer, but I just also think, has the census data been officially passed to 2002?
Say that again.
Well, as the census, I know there was a proposal to have the census data report late. Has that been passed by Congress?
I don't know. I know that the last I heard was that the Bureau was asking for like a 4-month extension,
right?
But then they were also going to give the data to the president late, which meant that it was going to get to states late. So yeah, I mean, it could be, who knows when it'll be, but I mean, I think a 2-year term would definitely be enough time. I guess I would hope it would be enough time to get the data back. I think my biggest concern is that it's not going to be accurate data. And, you know, if Rich's district only comes up with 10 college students, you know, I mean, what if we go down to 13 legislative seats, you know, I mean, so I guess it's all things to consider, but.
Yeah, I would just say it's simpler just to do nothing. We don't have to have put anything on the ballot, and we'll be able to sing longer, but then they'll just do it in 2025. And we can fix it then. So.
Yeah, and I think somebody would be hard pressed to say, to sue us or to say that we were, you know, acting irresponsibly, considering that we're in the middle of a pandemic and this is kind of the last thing on people's minds. I think everything is being postponed. So Mike Sigler, and then we should wrap up probably.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, if you wanted to come out of committee with 2 options, it just sounded to me like the favorite option, or the one that got the most support, was the do nothing. I mean, you had 4 votes. I didn't know where you stood, Amanda, on that, but it was an option maybe.
Yeah.
And the other one was the 2-year, which seemed to have at least 3 votes. And then again, you sounded like you were open to it. And Henry, I know you like the 5-year, so
yeah, thank you.
That's what it sounded like.
Definitely. I'm up for do nothing. I also would be okay with the 2-year. I think those would be my 2 top choices as well. So Rich, did you have something else to say, or is your hand still up?
I did have more. You mentioned my district, and I think there's an interesting thing there in that I've probably had more growth in my district than anybody else in the county, and yet the census result may well show a gigantic drop. And I don't know what we do about that, but it's yet one more problem with this whole process.
Yeah, exactly.
I just don't know, but it's interesting.
Jonathan, did you have something?
Sure. I just want to make clear, I think everybody knows, but that if the legislature were to choose not the do nothing option, but the 2-year option, still that wouldn't be the decision. Still have to pass a local law subject to referendum for that. So, I mean, that would just be beginning of a process if that was the choice of the legislature.
Right. And as we've talked about it, I think if by the June meeting, the legislature has started that in motion, that should be enough time to get it on the ballot in the fall. So we have, you know, a month left to come to a final conclusion. But okay, Martha, I see your hand up, but I'm not going to call on you because we're going to move on, and there's going to be a lot of time to talk. Greg, did you have a question?
It's up until 3:15 on your agenda, this discussion.
Martha, you can mute yourself. Thanks. Greg?
Yeah, so I don't want to throw another wrench into this decision, but having been involved in 2 redistricting processes in the past, one of the things that needs to happen is often there's a consideration about aligning the district lines, particularly with the city wards.
Right.
So if there's a timing issue here, that someone may also need to know what the city's intent is in the same discussion.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. That fell off my radar too, but I can check in with them. Thank you. All right, so I think Mike summed it up. We're gonna move on to the legislature with the options of doing nothing to change our 4-year terms until after a redistricting committee meets sometime in the next 4 years, or have a 2-year term and then go back to 4-year terms. So maybe Kathy, or Jonathan or somebody, and going forward, you can help me figure out how do we do that? Do we just have another discussion on the legislature floor? Do we need a resolution? I'm not really sure what the process will be, but it sounds like that's what the consensus of the committee is. So, great.
We can discuss that too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your comments and thoughts. I don't have much of a chair report, just a thank you to all the staff and to Jason and to everybody who's been working so hard during this time of intense stuff going on. And yeah, turn it over to Jason to tell us anything you want to tell us.
Thank you, Amanda. The only thing I have to say is we yesterday sent out our ROOP plans, which is our reconstitution and opening planning documents that Jay Franklin and the planning team put together. They are some guidelines to get departments starting to think about how they could reopen or issues that they would face reopening. It also triggers questions about what remote work can happen moving forward versus what didn't happen in the past. It's an initial planning process that will be fed more by the state as they begin to put out more guidance around density, office settings, PPE, masking, those types of things. But it's a good point to start our planning process so that should and when we open, at what point, which I still think is going to be multiple departments over an array of time. I don't think it's all going to happen at once. We'll be at least have a beginning planning process in place, and we have already given it some thought. So it's a balance of not getting too far down the rabbit hole because the state could totally change direction at any point in time, but it's also starting to think proactively about steps and measures that can be put in place. Other than that, gave you more than enough information 2 nights ago. Not too much has changed since then. There wasn't anything really announced on the governor's press conference today or yesterday in terms of more guidance on reopening, so we stand by on that. We had a good call with elected officials this morning. Chief elected officials had a good call with nonprofits. And that's all I have unless there's other questions.
Great, thank you. Questions for Jason? Anyone? All right, Lisa, anything you want to tell us about?
I have nothing further. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Jonathan?
The only thing I have to say is sort of update a little on the courts. As you probably know, we do a lot of family court business, and a lot of our business depends on the courts and what they do. We've gotten a lot of notices for hearings or appearances in the first 2 weeks in June. So I suspect the courts are intending to be kind of at full, at least the family courts, at full operations in some way or another in June, based on how many notices we've gotten. But again, that's a bit of speculation. I will say that tonight's guest at the NISAC talk is the chief administrative judge, so maybe he'll have a little more update. But we have a lot of notices for cases and appearances in the beginning of June, so I suspect they're working around that.
Okay.
And that's all I have as a report.
Questions for Jonathan? Henry?
Yes, Jonathan, I noticed that the governor also extended the non-eviction notice to like August 20th, I believe. And that was an order by the court to close the courts. So do you think he has to extend that order, or what's the, maybe Jason could know, what's the difference between him opening up courts not for evictions?
Well, again, I'm not really sure how coordinated the governor has been with the courts, to be honest. I mean, the governor's executive orders have dealt with evictions, and evictions, as you know, is one small part of a large court system. And obviously the courts kind of have to follow through by basically not doing that type of court until new petitions, et cetera, could be filed for evictions. But I don't really, it's obviously a small percentage of courts, and what they do, there's actually a bunch, as you know, in city court, very little in county court or Supreme Court and family court about that. So we deal mostly with those courts. So I think it'll have more of effect on city court than it would on any of the courts we regularly deal with. Occasionally we go to city court, but not very often.
Okay.
Jonathan, I was just wondering, in the past, like periodically you would give us an update on the current cases that the county is facing, and it would come in a confidential document. I don't know, is there any need to give us that update? I don't know if you can do that on email or how.
Yeah, I will do that. There's been some developments in a couple of cases worth noting. So I will update the confidential memo in probably before the next legislature meeting.
Okay.
But again, court has been, relatively quiet, but there have been, a couple of cases where there's updates.
Great, thank you. Drew is here from finance.
Nothing great to update folks on, except we are starting the audit. We started last week actually for the annual fiscal audit of the county. So
I cannot hear.
sorry, I know my mic's been low. Is that
Oh, that's better. Yeah.
better?
Better.
So we started the 2019 fiscal audit last week with Insero, and that's going to progress for the next couple weeks. So that's about it.
Great, thank you. Questions for Drew? All right, I don't see Dominic here unless he's
Here.
hidden behind someone else's name.
Yeah, I'm on Jay.
Oh, there he is.
Thanks.
Hey, Dominic, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here. So in the communications world, a lot of our work has been on COVID-19 response, especially from the EOC. The PIO team has been doing a really great job. And so it's been great to work with them. I have been beginning to work with other departments as well on some non-COVID related things, though everything seems to connect back to this crisis, including the Board of Elections. So it's been great to talk with them and help them around some of their planning, working with the planning department and a few others this week and in the coming weeks. Also around census, Nick, our management fellow, Amy and I had a conversation today, and we're going to be continuing to work with the PIAB and others on that. And then been doing some internal communications as well, specifically around some Q&As with Jason around furloughs and other staff things. So I've been collecting questions from staff members throughout the county. I think for tomorrow's Q&A, we have just over 45 different questions submitted. So we've been getting a really good response from county employees on that. And I've gotten some nice comments about transparency and other things in that regard.
Great. Thank you. Questions for Dominic? Anyone? Henry and then Martha. You're still muted, Henry.
Yeah. Why don't you let Martha go first, because I have a feeling she's going to ask the same question I'm going to ask.
All right, Martha.
Muted again.
You're a committee member. Go ahead, Henry.
I was going to ask about whether you were listening in when we talked about the redistricting stuff, and whether or not. Okay, whether or not you had any ideas about how to get the word out about basically our choices and trying to get the public input.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different opportunities. I'd have to get maybe a little bit deeper of a handle on it. I'm still sort of taking in some information, but I do feel like, especially right now, we have a pretty good apparatus for public input. And I think, I mean, obviously, we have a lot of numbers we've reported on social media. But I think with something like that, we'd need to be able to consider getting out a little bit wider from just that market as well. I think it's something we could work closely to get articles about, get some quotes and get some feedback in that way too. Maybe a public input section on the website, or something number to call or something like that.
Great. Do you have more, Martha? Or?
Yeah, I didn't speak yet. Yeah, I would urge that be done. There's actually a lot of interest in this. I mean, Mike Lane is not on this call at this point. He had to leave. This has really been a signature issue for him.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly hope we don't give up on the census. I think that this is going to affect the legislature. It's going to affect county government for 10 years to come.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really critical that people, there are people who are reading stuff online more than they used to. So there's an opportunity that we might actually get more comment than we would have in a normal time. So I appreciate anything you can do, Dominic, to help us get the word out, raise the issues, see what the different flavors of opportunity are and the different trade-offs. Could be raised on the elected officials call that Jason has with elected officials every week, because they'd obviously be affected, as Mike and Dan have said. So thanks for whatever you can do in this. Appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. And I think some of the messaging can be tied. I think the census is a really good place to tie things to and sort of connect, to share how much that influences all of the different pieces. So that's one of the conversations that Nick and I have had, and I plan to have with those other groups moving forward, so we can expand the messaging on what it truly does influence here.
Great, thanks a million.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah, so Dominic, why don't you and I check in and we can pull Mike Lane in and we can kind of see what we can do going forward. That'd be great.
Can do. Thank you.
All right. Henry, another question or? No? Okay, Greg Potter was going to give us a brief update on the website.
So we had planned to give an update on the website migration project at the same time the COVID-19 hit. So we delayed that presentation to you. But I wanted to quickly update you on the progress we've made with that project today. I know it's not on the agenda, but I talked to Amanda about it. So like Lisa has policy behind the scenes working on something, the website for us has really been one of those great projects to work with and coordinate with departments remotely. So we've submitted up about 17 departments that have already migrated to the new web format already, and we're doing those on batches by week. And so this week we're working on batch number 4. We are avoiding all of the departments that are critical to the COVID-19 outreach during this transition. So we're just ticking off those departments that are smaller or easier to handle, can be trained, and are not directly related to COVID-19. So we're going to get through those departments in the migration and then reach out to Dominic to work on the homepage and the sub parts of that homepage to better understand his needs as he has become the new our communications director for the county. So that was all designed based under the public information officer. So there might be some modifications to that. If you look at the website, one of the first ones that you can look at is Office for the Aging. So that has been migrated. So the migration goes from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. The new template and the new format of a Drupal allows for the compliance requirement and security requirement, simplification of the websites for data and content that we're working with each department as we migrate, along with the mobile perspective that is inherent in the redesign of the site. So if you look at Office for Aging on a smartphone, you'll see that it adjusts based on the size of the presentation or the screen automatically, without having to create 2 different versions of the site as we had to do in the past. So.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, so say again how many departments you've already kind of done and what Yeah,
17.
17. Okay.
So we're continuing on the batch this week. I think there's 4 more. And then we've got maybe next week are still some pretty straightforward, easy ones. And then they become a little bit more complicated. But one of those is the planning department, because they've got a lot of information out there. And so we're working then with them to reorganize their content now as well and leading up to that. The other, we did the county clerk's office, the DMV, social services. Those are other examples, ITS, GIS. And we're learning a lot in the process of when we do it. So when we get to the larger complex ones, we can better support them in the migration. We're also training the people as the migration occurs for the content managers in each department, and readjusting what we use as well called Site Improve to get the stats and the review of the migration during the course of it. So it's going well.
Yeah, good. And the response from departments has been positive. And
yeah, we've had a couple little hiccups with some of the migration, but generally it's been pretty good. And we're working with departments and giving them the attention incrementally on a case-by-case basis to get them adjusted to it before we move on to the next. So it's not a project where we have to migrate all or nothing. So we just redirect the sites. So if you see a www2 in front of the website domain that we have, it means it's been migrated to Drupal 8.
Okay, cool. Questions for Greg, anyone about the website? Well, thank you for continuing to work on that amidst all the other things that you have to do. We appreciate it.
Great.
I need to go back to, yeah, thank you. I need to go back to Rich for your vote on the minutes. You had cut out when I called your name on the minutes.
I gave a very enthusiastic yes.
No, Rich has voted yes for the minutes.
You what?
Voted yes for the minutes.
And Dan is the intermediary. Any
Acting clerk.
Acting clerk, thank you. Any comments or reports from committee members? Nope. All right. And there are a couple of budget adjustments and transfers for information. Any questions on those? All right. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.